love starting this. It's okay. It worked on your teacher. It doesn't mean your writing's not effective. This is just about how we can improve our writing, right? And the first one of these that I love to cover is just, you talk to your audience like they're stupid. And this is kind of an umbrella category, but our teachers didn't mean to, but maybe they just weren't convinced that everyone in your graduating class would really make it. And in fairness, most grammar rules were designed to apply broadly and to apply to sentences, not whole contexts. And were developed at a time when literacy was low and people could take a lot of time to read. They spent time with all the words, all the transitions, all the things, and they weren't reading in the same way. So a lot of the habits we get are based on older writing and older audiences that no longer are relevant to how you want to communicate and be effective today. So with that in mind, what I kind of consider this is like the ailment of this is wordy language that's overly formal. This is what you're suffering from. And the symptoms of this are often like too many transitions and overly qualifying statements using things like meanwhile, albeit, for example, meanwhile, these things that no one, if you were talking, really uses a lot. And sometimes they're good. They're really helpful. But we see them a lot in what people think of as authoritative or good language, right? And it really distracts readers who are trying to read quickly and get to the meaning of something. It kind of panders to this idea that they just don't get it. They didn't read the sentence before or the paragraph before. They're not following. And so you're giving them too much of a crutch instead of speaking to them like a peer. And that's what I mean by talking to them like they're stupid. Like, if we explain everything to you, you probably are like, okay, I don't really need the paint by numbers version. Now, the second thing I see as a symptom of this is language that has just a weird mouth feel for your ideal reader and yourself. And what I mean by that is like, if you don't use that word in normal conversation easily, or if your reader doesn't, it's going to feel weird. Like if you had to say that out loud, would you use the same word? And would they use it more importantly? Like I have a huge vocabulary and I love it. I'm in love with words. I have been since I was a kid. One of my favorite words is diaphanous. And one of my other favorite words is transmogrification. But I don't use them much, if at all, because it just feels wrong. And it's going to trip people up. It breaks from the flow and it makes them, if they have to stop and look something up too much, they're not going to come with you on that journey. So really thinking about what the language level you want to set is, how inclusive you want to be, and how much it really reflects who you authentically are. And that also reflects in like formulaic structures that end up feeling like footsteps on the dance floor. You found a structure once, you looked it up, someone told you, your teacher told you, you have a thesis statement and then a couple supporting paragraphs and these rules about what's going to work most effectively. And you end up repeating that. And you're kind of missing the fact that your audience is smart enough that if they're following along, it's going to start to feel really templatized. And at the same time, it doesn't allow you to really work with what is the best format for this moment, for what I want to say right now and what my purpose is in reaching out. So we also have to frame this around today's audience is different and they read a lot. They have very little time, and you have enough people out there that you can find the ones that naturally relate and can follow along to what your comfort level in vocabulary, flow, content is. Do not kind of create a oversimplified version of something or something that you think is going to be important, but you have to explain it a lot. Don't try and use language that is too heavy or too inappropriate. So that's just my first, I'll admit it, they're pet peeves. Also, I don't have access to chat while this is on there, but throw those things in. I'll check in. And Pete, if you don't mind, like you can tell me what people are asking or interrupt me or whatever it is, just to kind of expedite if you guys want any kind of feedback. If you want to tell me I'm wrong, totally okay.
Happy to. Do you mind also that Microsoft update up the top? Do you mind clicking away from that? Is that showing on your screen?
Showing? Sorry.
No troubles. Thank you.
It's showing everything.
Yeah, I don't know.
I need like a third screen that has another login. So with that said, the next one I have is getting away with murdering punctuation. This is all going somewhere, by the way. So I want you to meet comma, first of all. Comma has neither the time nor the patience to endure the abuse of his cuteness and affection. And what I mean by this is punctuation is an infrastructure for language. It makes a great design of what you're writing safe for public use, but it's not home decor. And it's more importantly, not the way you teach someone how to read out loud. For example, a comma I see overused all the time, and it takes away from people who aren't, talking verbally, reading what you have. You use them over liberally. We abuse them pretty horribly. This is the unabashed use of punctuation in an almost whimsical or freewheeling way. And it's sometimes confused for wit or trying to use a dramatic pause, or again, kind of telling people how to read what you're giving without actually minding that they've taken the time to learn these rules too, and they have an idea of what it means. So it's highly contagious, frequently recurring after a period of dormancy. Like we can undo all these habits, and we have to constantly check ourselves. And the symptoms of these things are like, run-on sentences where people decide they don't want to use a period, they want to use a comma over and over, or em dashes or semicolons, and it makes thought exhausting. It just makes these huge sentences that we get lost in, especially for digital audiences or audiences that are used to digital content, even if they're reading long form in paper, let's say, magazines, I love them. It gets to be really difficult because that's not the way they experience language in the easiest way for them. So remember just not to confuse readers with this tangle of ideas because you want to be kind of creative in the E.E. Cummings with punctuation. Try and be judicious with the way you use punctuation. We often use too many, exclamation points, question marks, things to convey emotion instead of earning that emotion with more evocative language. Ways to kind of reach people without saying, feel this now with a giant exclamation point, or I want to put a question mark here because I want to make sure people feel like they're coming along with me. Well, is it really a question? If not, maybe think of a different way to do that. And then third, we're halfway through this, the point of your work is not to grab the grade. Like that thing your teacher taught you, like praise is the output and really you're going to get this. Writing actually is extremely disappointing because unlike musicians, like we don't get immediate feedback. And when we do, it's sometimes the critical people that are most vocal. Like an insecure teenager, when we focus too heavily on being a certain persona, it becomes unrelatable and irritating. Attention-seeking behavior or drive derogates our voice, our authority, and ultimately the reader who's treated like a means to an end, the person who's being used to give you feedback and attention. Instead, focus on honesty and value that centers around the reader and comes from who you are. One caveat for that is that we don't want to do it for the grade, but we also don't want to strive for good enough. Writing is a process that can lead to a continual evolution. And the more you engage in really openly hearing feedback and critique and giving it and sharing it and letting it breathe, the better it's going to become. So the ailment of that is when you do that and you're suffering from this desire for a positive outcome, you end up with an inability to focus on the content itself. You have a preoccupation with the reward and a kind of self-obsession and anxiety permeates what you're doing. So that, like, for example, people that want to make everything sound super positive. Well, does that really feel real to us? Does it relate to us when we end up saying, well, I want to think about positive things in this moment when we're talking about something, let's say, that's crisis or current events or grief, for example, complicated things that we know how to express if we are willing to be vulnerable and open, and there's no formula for that. So those symptoms, what ends up happening is you end up oversaturated with monotonous tones, unbalanced work that comes across as shallow or unilateral, and unrelatable content that ultimately evokes distrust or boredom because people can't relate to you. In addition, you might end up using conciliatory or overly erudite language and too much of it because you want someone to feel like you're smart or you're sexy or you're funny or you're happy or you're like super guru of mindfulness. And so all of a sudden your language becomes too much of whatever it is. You're using too many conditional terms. You're trying to figure it out. And what I think that does is really take away from the power of who you are. Kind of second to last one here. The idea that your teacher gave you that you're special and talk pretty, so you should probably write. You have great ideas. Those are great things to encourage kids to do, to encourage budding anyone to do, right? Be bold, go out there, do it, and give people praise. But the problem with that is you need to disabuse yourself of the notion that you're special, because it will kill your writing. You may be very, very talented, but your potency in writing actually depends on your service to others. Don't think of yourself as a writer, even if you are. That's an aspirational goal. Think of yourself as someone who offers a passerby something to read, as we might find a fellow traveler and share a drink or a meal. Writing is ultimately participatory, and it depends on the reader being involved, picking it up. We have to thank them in a way by keeping them centered at the middle of what we're doing. You know, your words really don't matter until the point where they're taken in by them. And so when you don't do that, you end up with these almost amnesic episodes where you forget that there are people out there that want to hear from you, but they want to hear from you in a way that relates to them. You know, they matter. And so you end up kind of feeling like you're talking to yourself. Your language can end up florid, overly complex, inaccessible. You might think, I'm romantic, I want to get that across. So you end up with too many adjectives or romantic language that actually loses people. You might want to say, I'm a smart person and I have a smart thing to say about this, and you end up with language that's just alienating or sounds pompous. Instead, really think about the value you're giving to someone else. And finally, and you know, these are just points that frame what we're doing today, is check all the boxes. That idea that someone gave you that, you know, there's this great technique and that great technique and all of these things, that notion of a right formula with all of the things in it is like saying there's a right way to make spaghetti sauce. For readers, imagine having the same meal every day, an over-seasoned one at that, one that has everything you had in your cabinet in it. And for a writer, imagine a chef whose only dish is the perfect omelet. It doesn't apply everywhere, and it's not even fun after a while. You're just making omelets. So, you know, the way I like to think about it is every time I make spaghetti sauce, it's different. I improvise it. It depends on what I have in my cabinet, what I feel like, how much, you know, red pepper flakes I end up putting in the palm of my hand. And that variety will really add to what you're doing. So the element that kind of relates to this, like I'm putting all the stuff in, you know, kind of like the way a sixth grader learns to put on makeup, like do it all, is that it becomes imbalanced. You have technically fine writing, but it doesn't stand apart in any way. It doesn't, it loses something. You know, it's late night Chinese food. And the symptoms end up being things like, and watch for these, using too many cliches, adages, a plague of tried and true turns of phrases, overworked metaphors that we've heard a lot of times. We see this in younger people's writing because, you know, they're trying to emulate instead of express. Threadbare adjectives, a whole lot of buzzwords. Some marketing, like I see this in marketing all the time, where someone is trying to like sound really cool and edgy and they think there's a formula. It happens all the time. Predictable and often punchy plot lines or subjects, generic characters, contrived tones, all of this is, you know, is a problem. We see it in the over-reliance on cool references, cynicism and language, and cynicism is a big one. Because for a lot of people, humor or cynicism is a shortcut that masks their vulnerability and says, look, if you're cool, you'll like my writing, you'll get what I'm saying. But it isn't always really effective. And honestly, those kitsch tricks may work in a moment, but they don't age well. So, you know, your better strategy is to really act with humility and be judicious about what you're using where. Don't try and throw everything in the pot at once. This comes down to editing. So I'm sorry to throw that all on you, but we're getting to our first writing break now. And this is to keep you limber. It's like a wellness break for the soul. So you've got your paper, you've got your pen. Is everyone ready? Pete, do people sound ready? Do we have any questions?
Ready. We're ready.
All right. Okay. So this is a free write. I want you to describe your favorite comfort item as if you were describing it to someone in a letter who had no reference for it. A loving tribute to something mundane but extraordinary that gives you utter joy. And it must be a thing. It cannot be an idea. You want it to be a thing. And it doesn't have to be a product. It can, but I'm not asking you to necessarily describe a specific thing, but maybe it's blankets. For example, some Californians may go on and on about the sublimity of the humble avocado. I love avocado. My dog would probably go on about the joy of sticks. And for some, it's something as simple as clean laundry or a hot shower. But think noun, like not a proper noun, a common noun that is totally amazing to you. All right, so we're gonna have 3 minutes to do this. Just write. There is no right or wrong on this, no pun intended. Just go. Pick whatever style you want to do and use whatever is comfortable, because the point of this is to get it out. All right, are we ready? All right,
Ready.
Go. Five seconds, wrap it up. And time. Okay, how are we feeling?
Feeling good.
Fantastic. All right, so I hope that was easy, fun. You had a lot to write. Keep it there. I want you to save it. We're gonna go back to it. So building on this, I want some quick tips. I didn't want to just ruin your great teacher's encouragement or your confidence about something. These are some quick tips that just I feel build better habits, and we could go on about each of these subjects for an hour. We could really dive into this, but these are a few I think are really important. So the first one is just cultivate authenticity and empathy to find the voice within that works with others. And both of those things are really important. Some people, emphasize one or the other. I think both are really necessary for you to have something of value that you're giving of yourself and have it be worthwhile. This is why I like that metaphor of giving someone something to eat, sharing a meal. Like, these are things that are sustaining, but they're also part of our emotional well-being. There's something that's vulnerable that we get and give in the same moment from. The second one, so again, writing to be vulnerable but feel good, I think is the lesson there. The second thing is, remember that successful innovation comes from mastering the basics, followed by a natural evolution of how you apply them. Writing is always aspirational. You have to learn, you have to keep learning, you have to keep practicing. And that doesn't mean you're bad. It means that, Da Vinci had to learn paint before he could create master works. And we're doing the same thing. You have to prep before you run a marathon. I would suggest at least a 10K. So these are things that you want to understand and always go back to, checking yourself as you go. Am I being authentic? Am I being empathetic? Am I really paying attention to the rules? So how's my grammar? Am I doing those bad habits that I connect? And that is the way that you constantly get better and stronger and build.
Cristina, can I jump in? Sorry to be annoying. Sorry to cut you off. Your low battery thing is showing on the screen, and I just want to make sure you're not about to run out of battery and we'll lose you.
I didn't have low battery, so let me fix that. I'm sorry, I worked really late on this, so.
No, I'm sorry. I just didn't want you to drop out halfway through and then we'll lose all this amazing guidance.
So we're going to have to pause for a second because apparently I didn't bring my block in with me. So give me 1 second.
No troubles. Sorry, everybody. I thought better that than I certainly can't take over and run this class afterwards, that's for sure. While Christina's doing that, I should say we originally set these calls up because we run creative practice through the community as well. And it's kind of half an hour. You do drawing and we do writing exercises and things like that. And so some of the exercises will do things like combine, write about a bagel and a teaspoon and a fish and go and write something. And then you've got like a minute to do it and everybody goes off and writes whatever. And my writing is not particularly as strong, but then Cristina always brings together these incredible, descriptive, amazing kind of insightful paragraphs and things. And so I was like, wow, we should really, it'd be really great if you could teach other people how to at least start this journey. So I just wanted to give everyone the context. That's how these originally started off as well. So thanks, Cristina, while you're getting your battery.
I just love that I had that moment to run out and hear something sweet when I came back.
Oh, okay.
In full fairness, guys, I'm so sorry about that. Super unprofessional. I stayed up really late working in my living room on this. And in the hecticness of going to a doctor appointment and everything, I guess I moved part of the plug and not the other. So I did warn you, my tech skills, not great.
Right, we're back and good to go. Sorry to interrupt.
All right. So let me jump back in there. That I was on the third point here that I have, which is just that, we want to think of writing as between people, inviting your reader in. And you'll see there's a lot of overlap in these different criticisms and kind of advice points. So when we do this, we want to continually ask, how is this meaningful to my reader? Whether it's a business email or business writing, or whether it's actually your fiction or whatever, why is this the thing that you want to share and what do you want them to get out of it? So we're solving for something. Maybe that's even just loneliness, that we want someone to feel something that they probably feel similarly to, that we want to create camaraderie. That's still a gift. So it can be about your experience and still be about them. But what you want to make sure of is, why is it appealing? So in that moment, when you're sharing something vulnerable and you're getting into that, you want to realize that you want to share the feeling itself. So you're not telling them how to feel. You're explaining what you're going through. And that honesty will be really powerful. For any of you that are total geeks like I am, there's a hint on this too. You can always check with logos, pathos, and ethos, which are the traditional rhetorical persuasive methods. What is the logic of it? What's that value offer there logically that someone's getting from it? Or pathos, which is the emotion. Like, what is the emotional feeling that we are persuading someone with? How do we make them feel? Or finally, are we appealing to something they want to or do believe in? Because that's really important too. So that's the third one. And the fourth one is, I want you to write from the heart, but edit from your head. So when you are writing, especially that initial draft, write anything. I don't care if you use cliches and too many adjectives. If you like rhyming, I don't care. Do what gets it out. But when you go back in, realize that refining and editing and critique, that's a work that is an act of love. That job is so important. It helps us refine what we're giving to someone else. It's the wrapping, it's the polish. And we want to remove excess language in that process, strike cliches, get to the heart of what we're giving them, and use the space you've just made to replace what you needed to write in that moment, just to get it out with something that will sound fresh and visceral to someone else, something that captures better what you really feel about it. Now, the way we bring this all together is this last piece of advice, which is just practice formless writing. Capture moments, thoughts, observations about people and things you see, feelings in a journal. Really kind of vivisect them and write down what you see around you that make a moment or a person meaningful. Those sorts of details will help you automate more expressive writing as you go. And it can be I have like cocktail napkins from bars when I was 21 that have like a cool but random saying on them that I wrote down. Or, there are things that you'll hear someone say and you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. I so feel that. Kind of find a way to let it sink in for you. And, on that, I have two last little tips. First of all, welcome criticism like it is a lost love. We need those outside eyes. We want to connect with them. We feel their lack when they are not with us, and they bring a lot of meaning to our life and to our reading. Criticism is a gift, and it's a hard one to take, but mostly because we need it so much, and we are so worried about what people think of us. But if we really feel it, they're gifting us something back. They're giving us their time to engage with what we're trying to do. And that's super important. And finally, don't helicopter parent. You cannot protect your writing from opinions. You need to let it out there. Don't follow it down. Don't read over someone's shoulder. I'm horrible at this, by the way. I'm horrible at a lot of this. I noticed this when I used to do poetry and poetry readings. Everyone wants to go with their poem and share it with you and then explain it. And I'm like, well, are you going to explain it if it gets published? Are you going to go to everyone if you get 10,000 views on something and say, no, I need you to understand it the right way. That's not what I meant. If someone doesn't understand it the right way, go back and revise it or write an addendum. But do not try and be there and pick it up and overly protect it from the world. You're doing yourself and you're writing a disservice. So that's the most, we've gotten through the pedantic part of this. We're about halfway through, and the rest is really about you. So we're gonna keep going. So writing break part number 2. Any questions, comments? Pete, I know you have the chat.
No, but it's all landing. People, helicopter parenting is what I do with passion, was one comment in the chat.
So I do it. I had to learn all of these things the hard way, and sometimes from mentors and teachers who are like, hey, can you just, like my fiance still is like, can you shut up and let me read it? Because you just asked me to. I literally finished a piece yesterday for work, and it was like midnight. And I'm like, can you read this, please? I really need you to read it. And he was like, sure. And then I talked through it, and he was like, I'm gonna need you to stop. So we do it because we care. And that's why these are all important pieces of advice, because we do them almost instinctively. So, and from a good place. So the writing break number 2, this is not so much a wellness break. This is to keep you on your toes. I want you to feel alert. I want this to wake up your creativity a little bit. And we're going to use the writing you did before. I'm not going to ask you to write something new. So I hope you really like the thing that you said you liked. So this is what I'm going to call a tough love exercise. We are going to spend 3 minutes revising and editing the work you just did. And when you do it, I want you to look for how you can creatively expand on the sensory benefits, the things that make you happy about this thing that brings you comfort and joy. I want you to say it like you were saying it to an Inuit or an extraterrestrial being, like someone who doesn't even know what the color of an avocado is. Do something that really helps flesh it out. And I want you to explain why this thing is comforting or meaningful to you. It's really important. Why is it that? So you can also look at how it works, functions, where it's from, its origin story, if that's somewhere you want to go with it. That's really meaningful to you. Like maybe it's your favorite blanket and your grandma made it. Who knows? Remove all of the excess, tired, or cliche language. It's natural that it's going to be there. So go through and, when I do these things, I just cut whatever, or I look at it and I'm like, ooh, that didn't come out as well as I do. Or I saw something that I love and I'm like, okay, I want that. I want to run with it. So be okay with reworking this and replace anything tired with something fresher. Now I'm going to give you 3 minutes. So get to it. Save your original copy, because this progress is really great for looking at or sharing with someone else. All right, and go.
And just to clarify, do we rewrite or kind of cross out the previous one? Rewrite a new one.
I'm gonna restart because I think that's important. Well, my suggestion is to take a copy of it. If you wrote it longhand, you'll just want to kind of make notes or do whatever and rewrite it in the way that you feel improves it.
Okay.
So, for me as a typer, I'd copy and paste it, and I'd probably go and cut, change, do whatever. It may look very similar, or it may look totally different. And that drift, even if it's expanding or contracting, is really good.
Perfect. Thank you.
Starting over now. Two minutes. Okay, and 5 seconds. I want you to finish up and stop. Okay, so this was a little more challenging, probably. How is anyone feeling? If you want to just throw it out there, If you feel more comfortable, you can put it in the chat, or just speak up. You can actually see the chat on my phone, I realized.
I could go first.
Yeah, please.
So in my first iteration, I've written something like, so I'm talking about my Google Home and how it easily changes my mood with just a voice command. That's what I've written in the first edit. So when you said like add the sensory benefits, I actually changed it to, its music fills my apartment like warmth is spread with sunlight, and I literally feel like that. So I think that's the edit for me.
That's beautiful. And honestly, you should send that to Google because that's great copy. I mean, if you were writing marketing, that's the difference between what you can do and what the power of being able to do that is. It's a great bit of feedback and change, transformation.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else want to share? All right, we can move on. No one has to share. This is up to you. All right, so we're gonna go right into another little writing break because I kept so much of your attention pedantically earlier. This is another one that's supposed to keep you on your toes, and it's gonna work on the same thing. I'm gonna call this the green eggs and ham exercise. We're gonna take that same thing you just wrote, that evolution that you're creating, and using that original concept or whatever you wrote in it and that transformed concept, I want you to, I've got a little bit of a switch gear. It turns out that someone else saw your loving missile to your comfort item, and they're totally grossed out and put off by it. They do not like it. They don't think it's great. Don't want to eat it on a train or a plane or with with anyone else. They do not like green eggs and ham, whatever it is that's your comfort thing. Now, granted, they have no previous experience with your comfort items. So this is a knee-jerk or guttural reaction, but people have them. So again, make another copy of what you wrote. You don't have to change it if you don't want. You can use it. If you are long writing and you'd rather just keep going, you can do that, whatever works for you. But in this next 3 minutes, I want you to write this to someone or about them in some way, whether it's a letter or a vignette or a pitch, or even just changing the language and entreaty or in some other way. I want you to respond to this woman right here that I've picked up who is just like, I don't like your stuff. And try and explain this thing to them in a way that appeals to them. So try and consider in reframing it and acknowledge the valid reasons or counterpoints to why this person doesn't like your beloved item. They probably have some validity in where they're coming from. And they may be wrong, but you got to acknowledge them. And then figure out ways to bring them into trying out your item. Think about the emotional, logical, and value-based ways to inspire them to try it out or why it would be beneficial for them, not just how you feel. Try and make that connection. So we're going to run with that. Again, it's just quick 3 minutes. And any questions before I start the clock? All right, go. 2 minutes. All right, you've got 5 seconds, so you might want to wrap it up. And time. All right, any feedback? How are we feeling about that one? And again, I figured out how to cleverly use multiple devices to pull up my chat, so if you prefer, you can always put it in there. Or we can just move forward. All right, so, I know we don't have all the time in the world, so let's just keep going then. Another changing moment. We're going to do a rematch of Green Eggs and Ham. But did we say the super cool blonde? That was way too easy. We meant this little heavyweight here. She is hell bent on knocking down your idea of a good time in favor of cartoons and juice boxes. I want you to rework the content to convince this darling little naysayer that she would, and she could, and she would like to try whatever it is on a train or in a plane. You want to convince her that she is totally down for your product. All right, or thing, sorry. All right, and if there are no questions, you're old hat at this now, and start. Two-minute warning. Okay, now you want to wrap it up. We'll just have a few more seconds in time. All right. That hopefully has been a great set of exercises for you. If anybody would like to share their thoughts or feelings, if you just want to keep going, we can do that. All right. Quiet.
I found in both. I started both with questions, and I probably wasn't meant to. I'm sorry, but I kind of switched into sales mode of like asking them a question, like, "What's the nicest thing you have ever experienced?" So I could kind of draw them in and relate to that, and then basically I was saying what I was talking about is going to be better and things like that. But I found in both situations I started with a question. I don't know if anybody else did.
That's a super interesting approach, and I'm really intrigued by that because it is a way of very blatantly acknowledging them.
Too blatant, probably.
No, honestly, that can really work, and especially like looking at some of the writing you've done and shared with us, like you have a very quick wit and way of kind of acting on your feet with your language. That's a great technique for you. It's definitely a really popular sales technique, but not everyone does it well. I have a feeling that you probably do it very well. So I love that idea. Again, there's no rules here, so who knows? All right, then we're going to keep. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so for the first one with the blonde woman, my like instinct was to just start like justifying everything I had said. I was like, no, you don't understand. I have this like emotional attachment. I picked like an apple and like the sound it makes when you bite into it. But obviously, like a little kid doesn't care, like doesn't understand what nostalgia is and doesn't care. So then I had to like think of it from I had to like remove the personal aspect of it and be like, well, like, have you ever seen Snow White? And like, she was willing to risk it all just because it was a good apple. So like, it was just fun to change the perspective on it.
No.
I love that. I was literally thinking of like how different these two people were when I picked them out of random, Unsplash pictures, because it is a totally different approach with children from like someone who's very cool and put together, an adult. So I love that you totally took a different approach to it and really realized that in one you could try and build bridges, and the other one you had to be more focused on the reader. It's a really good point and good instinct. All right, well, I have a few more here so we can keep going. This little section is just learning from the greats. I feel like this is a helpful thing to do. This kind of brings us back to where we started. Why find a new route to, up Mount Everest when it's already been done? But then again, you don't want to follow the guy who died up there. So we want to kind of balance how we take in and how we learn. Even if you don't like that they did it, they like, even if you don't like what they did, they probably did it better than you to get to being wherever they are now. Now, that doesn't mean it's still relevant. So in this case, it's, this very famous passage from Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities. We literally almost ever only hear it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, because we lose track after that. This is a cringeworthy amount of commas and abuse of like the em dash. And really by the end of it, if you read through this, and this is true of most Dickens, you have a hard time figuring out, you kind of get your point. You went through all these contrasts that you could relate to. That's great. But then he gets to that some of the noisiest authorities insisted on it being received for good or evil in the superlative degree of comparison only. Oh my God, to this dog's point, there are 444 more pages of that. I wonder if it's on TikTok. It is a lot. And it came from a different time, but we still see people try and do this. It's absolutely shocking. So I wanted to contrast that with something from a man of an economy of words who really was pretty laconic. Ernest Hemingway said that all you have to do is write one true sentence, write the truest sentence that you know. He was thinking about this and he said, so finally I would write one true sentence and then go on from there. It was easy then because there was always one true sentence that I knew I had seen or had heard someone say. If I started to write elaborately or like someone introducing or presenting something, I found that I could cut that scroll work or ornament out and throw it away and start with the first true, simple, declarative sentence I had written. Up in that room, I decided that I would write one story about each thing that I knew about. This is Hemingway. Now, Hemingway was not actually, he didn't do this by design. This is a process that he got to. But if you look at it, we can all find one true thing, one simple true thing in a day or in our lives or in a feeling. And that we can start with that and then edit back. The importance of editing. We aren't born to genius. This was really important. What I like that we get out of Hemingway's words here is, to be yourself. It can be kind of intimated from his suicide that Hemingway was not brimming with hope and self-confidence. He didn't recognize himself and was often conflicted about his genius. He had a very troubled life. And he was quoted at one point, and I tried to find it, but I couldn't, as being quite surprised that he had revolutionized writing. I think it was when he received the Pulitzer, if I'm correct, that he was like, I never intended to create a new style. He simply didn't think he was that good a writer. And he went through a lot of time trying to simplify and correct his writing. So his editing actually became a huge part of his genius. What we can learn from that is we don't need to be confident. We don't need to feel like we're perfect. We need to just be clear and own our own simple truths that rise up from what we personally experience. Another few things that I get: edit out what doesn't matter. Don't be like Dickens, like embrace clarity, if for nothing else, the digital era. And write from what you know. The heart can see things your mind cannot contrive. So go with it. Trust it. Finally, we are at time, but I have a bonus round. It's a kind of a lesson in letting go. If you wanna stick around for 2 more minutes. This little quote: for sale, baby shoes, never worn. It's often thought of as one of the most succinct stories, complete stories. One sentence. It has a hero, it has conflict, it has emotion, it has a lot of things in it that we strive to do with a lot more words. It has been misappropriated and misattributed to everyone from Hemingway to Churchill to all kinds of people. There's a lot of mythos, and yet no one really knows where it came from. So with that, in 2 minutes, final 2 minutes for anyone that can stick on, we just saw that example of a one-sentence story. It's often falsely attributed to Hemingway, like for its brevity and its impact. But taking a lesson from Papa Hemingway, let's take the work that we have and whittle it down into a story. Let's try and write a story that's coming from the work you just did with about 200 words or less is my challenge to you. And for reference, the above that you see on that page, that's 50 words. So we're looking at a little long of a tweet. I'm going to give you 2 minutes and you can start now. Okay, that's 1 minute. Okay, and wrap it up. That is time. Okay. I believe I can stop sharing my screen now. If I can, if I can as always figure that out, which I think I did.
Done.
I appreciate that so many of you have stayed on, even though we went over time. How is everyone feeling? Back to my train wreck. But all right.
Feeling good. Really enjoyed this.
Very good. I'm really glad. Thank you all for your patience and your time and the energy that you brought to this. Feel free to, kind of interact with the group, share if you like. You can always reach out to me if you want feedback, if you have feedback for me, if you thought it was too long, too expositional, too short. If there's something you want me to cover as we go forward in these workshops or problems that you're having that you want to kind of tackle, please let me know, because, I'm here to help, and we together go forward. Again, I'm sorry for some of the technical problems. I kind of ran into some deadlines this week, so I was a little scattered this morning, but I am really, really excited to be here with you.
Thanks, Cristina. Thanks so much for hosting this, and thanks everybody for jumping on. This has been really good. I've got a lot to practice, but thanks so much for taking us through it all.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, you guys, and thanks to Pete and Todd for really stepping up on these things.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Cristina.
Absolutely.
Have a great weekend.
Bye,
Happy
everyone.
Friday, everyone.